All right, ladies and gentlemen, the main event, heavyweight bout, Sergey Pavlovich. 260 and a half for the number 3 ranked UFC heavyweight contender, Sergey Pavlovich. Up next on the scale, your heavyweight main event, Curtis Razor Blaydes. 262 and a half for the number 4 ranked heavyweight contender, Curtis Blaydes. With the women's featherweight, Carol Hossa. $144 and a half for the number 9 women's featherweight contender. Up next on the scale, in the welterweight division, Matthew Semi the Jedi Semmelsberger. 171 for Matthew Semmelsberger. Up next on the scale, the bantamweight division, Ronnie Yaya. 136 for Ronnie Yaya. Up next on the scale, the women's featherweight division, Norma the Immortal Dumont. 145 for the number 13th ranked Norma Dumont. Up next in the lightweight division, Rick the Gladiator Glenn. 155 and a half for the Gladiator. Up next, the UFC bantamweight, Montel Jackson. 136 for Montel Jackson. And now the UFC lightweight, Christos the Spartan Yagos. 155 and a half for the Spartan. Up next in the women's flyweight division, Yasmin Lucindu. 126 for Yasmin Lucindu. Up next on the scale, the UFC middleweight division, Bruno Silva. 186 for Bruno Silva. And now the UFC heavyweight junior, the Juggernaut Tafa. 252 for the Juggernaut. Up next, the UFC lightweight, Jared Flash Gordon. 155 and a half for Flash Gordon. And now the UFC welterweight division, Jeremiah Wells. 171 for Jeremiah Wells. Up next, the UFC lightweight, King Bobby Green. 156 for Bobby Green. Up next, the UFC middleweight, Brad Tavares. $185 for Brad Tavares. Up next, UFC bantamweight, Brady Bam Bam Heastan. 136 for Bam Bam. Up next, the women's flyweight, Carini Killer Silva. 126 for Carini Silva. Up next, UFC featherweight, Francis Marshall. 146 for Francis Marshall. Up next, the UFC bantamweight, Donna Batgril. 136 for Donna Batgril. Up next on the scale from the UFC heavyweight division, Mohammed the Motor Usman. 239 and a half. Mohammed the Motor Usman. Up next on the scale, the UFC women's flyweight, Brogan the Bear Walker. 126 for Brogy the Bear Walker. All right, up next on the scale, the prelims, the UFC women's flyweight division, Priscilla Cachoeira. 130 for Priscilla Cachoeira. All right, our last guy to weigh in from the UFC featherweight division, William Jaguar Gomez. 147 for the Jaguar.